Morning and welcome to The Point. It is Thursday, July 9th, 2020. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Television Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, those of you on the website www.gbn.gd, those of you watching on GBN TV channel 7, 11 or 20, or the folks listening on Classic 105.5, 105.9, Hot 98.5, 98.7. This morning I have joining us virtually is a former Director of Tourism here in Grenada, Mr. William Joseph, and we are talking about the impending reopening of the Morris Bishop International Airport, tentatively scheduled for next week, Wednesday, God willing, July 15th and August 1st. Good morning, Mr. Joseph.
Hi, good morning to you and to all of your listeners and viewers.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue the discussion that started yesterday on the GBN Nightly News, and thank you again for facilitating. We would start first of all with maybe some general or some basic information. One of the concerns that members of the public have raised since government announced the reopening of the borders was that why are we reopening and COVID-19 is still very much out there? From your perspective, somebody who has basically been involved in the tourism industry, why is it important to reopen our borders even if COVID-19 continues to be a danger?
Well, that's a very loaded question, several parts. Choose where to begin and where to end, if you don't mind. I think we could begin public by bearing four things in mind. We talk about reopening. One is the question of the infrastructure. In this case, the Morris Bishop International Airport primarily. And then you have to bear in mind the economy, the society, and we add this very crucial one, which touches the heart of the question you've put, the question of the public health status of the country and concerns and issues related to that. Now, the airport, the Morris Bishop International Airport, is really a symbol of Grenada's standing on the world stage. In other words, the airport gives us a place on the world stage, as small as it is, small as we are, and that is important. But the airport, without tourism, the Morris Bishop International Airport really is going to be a white elephant. So you see why we're talking the economy now, the airport is central to the question of the economy. And so where we had been shut down for a long period of time and where the economy has suffered and the society has suffered, we need now to put in place sensible and prudent measures for receiving guests again into Grenada. But now, in addition to what we've been accustomed doing, we must now do some new things. And all of those new things, I would think, would have to do with a concern, a central concern about the safety of the Grenadian public. Remember, the thing came here, COVID-19, through the airport. It can come again through the airport. So we're in a situation where, although in theory, the authorities, the government of Grenada and so on, are not normally in the business of taking risks. We see them more as a sort of rational, in fact, require them to be a rational decision maker. But this is one case where people are going to have to manage the question of risk. And in that context, they need to put in place optimal arrangements. They will never be perfect, but it could be optimal so that there is every reasonable confidence that we would not import the disease simply on the basis that the borders are open again. So I'm raising a couple of things. One is the relationship between the public health concerns, our lives really, and the question of the economy, which also has to do with our lives. So how do we bring these things into balance, as it were, so that we have a level of confidence as citizen A and citizen B that we know what we're doing, we've put the best arrangements in place, and so on, to receive visitors again into Grenada. So that's a long answer.
Appreciate the answer. With the first phase of the reopening, July 15th, next week, Wednesday, God willing, we're starting with Caribbean countries who are considered low risk. This is a reduction in what we usually get when it comes to people coming into the airport, because we're not doing international flyers as yet. Would that affect our tourism product, and how would it affect the revenue that we usually get from the tourism industry?
Well, the product is set. The product is set and will remain set, except that COVID would have induced certain twists to the product. And that would have to do with the reception. How do we facilitate our visitors into Grenada? And while they are here, how do we look after them while we look after ourselves? So you have that consideration in play. Now, regional tourism has always been very important to Grenada. But for a long time, regional tourism was shaped largely by events. At the top of that list, of course, is Carnival, right? And we'd succeeded some years ago with the Let's Go Grenada program, which was masterminded by Anne-Marie Marichaux at the Board of Tourism then, to grow our appeal for Caribbean tourists into Grenada, and we saw large volumes of people coming in. Now, when we're talking about Caribbean tourism in the present context, we have to first think in terms of what has happened in the Caribbean countries where people live. Have people, and the answer is not very hard to find. We just need to look at what has happened with our own people. Unemployment and loss of income and so on. It has happened here. It has happened in all the other source markets in the Caribbean. So the first point is that the demand for a Grenada vacation is going to be affected by the ability of Caribbean people to pay for that vacation. In the context where there has been income fragility, people have lost incomes and people have lost employment also. They go hand in hand. So I think another way to look at your question is for us to say, listen, let us put a damper on our expectations regarding volume of tourists into Grenada, whether it is from the Caribbean region or it is from elsewhere. I think we need to factor that and be very clear about that. We are not going to have large volumes of people in the immediate period. People are not going to come flooding in simply because there's an announcement that the airport is open for business, right? The demand has to be there, the ability of people to pay for a Grenada vacation, and the question of load factors. This is where the airlines come in now. Load factors that airlines would be interested in terms of their financials when you say operate a flying program into Grenada. So it's a complex issue.
I agree. It is complex indeed. Sometimes I'm glad I'm not in certain positions to make certain decisions, especially in situations like this. Since the closure of the airport in March, it would be now, let's say, approximately 4 months since the airport has been closed. And over the past few weeks, we have heard from various airlines more or less threatening countries to reopen your borders or else, or give us a schedule for when we can resume flights to your territory or else. Why is it important to hold your ground? Because Grenada is one of the maybe the last of countries to reopen. Why is it important to stand your ground to ensure that everything is in place before you reopen, instead of giving in and caving into the demands of these airlines?
Well, I've heard talk of that, but I don't know how solid it is. Let's take it at face value. Assume that they've made these noises. Okay, airlines are owned by individuals. They operate as companies and so on for profit. They don't run countries. Airlines don't run countries. Okay, we need them as part of the infrastructure to support our tourism industry, bring people into Grenada. They are in business. They have equipment, planes in this case, that they are anxious to fly because they're losing money when the planes remain in the desert. So you could understand why they would be interested in that. I think one aspect of the noise that I would admit is to say that I think they want to be in a position where they could begin to plan the use of their equipment, right? That is not the full story. When you say that, okay, well, here's the date and so on, the question now is marketing the flights. The airlines don't really market flights. They indicate the availability. Now it is for tour operators and travel agents and independent travelers and so on to say, let's book tickets. So it's not, no, these players don't operate in isolation, right? We can open, the airlines can say we're ready, and tourists saying, I am not ready. Can you fly in? It makes no sense, you see? So a number of things have to come together, and we need to include in that the question of the hotels, in this case in Grenada, their readiness to receive tourists and so on. So I don't know how much, I'm not really bothered by that noise that you talk about, because I think there's a process through which people are going to come to Grenada, and nothing really jigs that. Bottom line, there are two elements going on there. One is who pays for what. Because if the load factors are weak, and an airline is saying, I'm committed to flying, and the local authorities are anxious about that because they want the public to see that they're doing something about the economy, they then say, let us meet in a room and negotiate support for the flight program. In other words, see guarantee arrangements, things of the kind, right? The airlines are not going to come here losing money. Trust me, they're not going to come here losing money. They're going to call on somebody. Typically, it would be the government of Grenada and the tourism sector to cover whatever shortfall they might be seeing in terms of the revenue flowing from bookings. There you are.
Okay. As part of the reopening on the 1st of August, the government has advised that countries listed as medium risk will be allowed to fly into the island, such as Canada, the UK, and other countries in the EU. That excludes the United States. How big of a hit would that be for Grenada's tourism, that we no longer have, or for now, we cannot accept flyers from one of the largest markets? How big of a hit would that be?
Okay, so before we come to the hit, I think we need to reflect a little bit on these classifications that they have announced, right? Low risk and medium risk and so on. Right. My thing yesterday, I believe, and I asked myself, who established the criteria by which countries are classified? So you could see geography and you could see the intensity of the COVID. In other words, the extent to which the COVID is present in a particular country. So you do that, right? And then it's a crude kind of way of approaching it. But in terms of what we are faced with, many people would be happier if, for example, the announcement said, on the basis of criteria established by the WTO, by the WHO, or CAFA, and so on, here is what is going to happen. Here's how we have structured the resumption program. And then there's another issue, So that's the first line. Below that line, you have the question, as I say, the line of geography and intensity of the COVID, which is the top line. Below that, you have the question of the movement of people. So you can have someone who might have flown from a medium risk country, spend a couple of days in a Caribbean vacation, low risk, and then take a flight into Grenada. Have we protected ourselves in that regard? The geography doesn't protect us. You see, so it seems to me that we have to be addressing also the question of the place of origin of people in terms of when last they were home. When last? So you're from Canada and so on, and you're medium risk. When last were you in Canada, even though you're flying in from St. Vincent? When last were you there? So in other words, we are talking about layers of safeguards that need to apply. Now, having said that, it brings us to the question of information. But I let me delay on that because I promised to respond to your question of the hit. So let me try to respond to the hit question, and then you ask me something, please, about the information that's required by the industry, so we could share a little bit on that.
No problem.
Now, I think the GTA record would show that the US market is, I think now the primary source of stay-over visitors into Grenada. Europe was after. I mean, Europe including and led by the UK, right? They are big volumes into Grenada. And in fact, because Europeans tended to stay longer than Americans, then in fact, the earnings from that market, certainly in my time, used to be very much more significant than the earnings from the US market. I am not selling the point, I'm only making the observation. So whether you are medium risk or you are high risk, it means that on our side, we have to connect that thinking up with our expectations regarding revenue. Okay, so you have a reality on your hand. You cannot pretend that the thing is open to everybody. You said it's not, and therefore, if it's not, you would not expect to get a kind of occupancy that we used to enjoy, and then based on the occupancy, the kinds of earnings that occupancy would provide, and so on. So you have to start to trim the sales, right? They're going to, the numbers are not going to be where they used to be. So the hit is really implicit in the facts. It is going to be a period when we will not have access to that flow of revenue because the thing has been closed, right? And we have to live with that until the thing fares better.
You wanted to speak about the information required by the industry.
Yes. So, and this is an important issue because the announcement of the reopening constitutes one bundle of information. Okay? So that news has gone over the place. But when we take the tourism business into consideration, there's a need to fine-tune that information. See, there's a need to fine-tune that information. So we ask who must get the information. And for the tourism purposes, we would say travel agents, tour operators, and so on and so on. We must say who must provide the information. And we would say the GTA, because that is the entity in Grenada that is established for that purpose. What's the level of details? Well, that announcement yesterday, we have to package that and present it in a way that the average traveler could follow and understand. So people know what to expect. If you are interested in Grenada, we are going to be informed as to what the requirements are for you getting into Grenada. So that's very important. How we present it, the optics of the thing, that has its place. And where should that information be put? So in the modern world in which we live, the appetite for information on social media and so on, we have to put it there, and we have to put it on our websites, and we have to send it through other official. And as I say, website, I want to raise a point, and I'm raising it not because I want to or intend to bash the GTA, but in preparation for this program, I thought I should check on their website to see what they are saying to the public, what they are saying to the world. Sorry, and I have not found on the website. I have not found a welcome for the times or an invitation for the times. In other words, if you go there, you will not see anything about reopening, that we have reopened. You will not see a selling proposition for the destination that's called Grenada in the new context. In the new context, you see, if you go on the Sandals website, you're going to see what I'm talking about. The Sandals have something there in their invitation and welcome that includes the word safe, right? They talk about the platinum safety protocol and so on. So in the period in which we are trying to do our business, we have to get a lot more serious, right? People have to wake up and smell the cocoa. You have to smell the cocoa. Otherwise, we will be shortchanging Grenada, right? Everybody is a competition now for the scarce supply of tourists. All the destinations are going to be doing their level best to try and capture the few who are willing to travel at this time. It begins with the invitation. What is that invitation? What is the promise that the destination is making to people whom they desire to come into Grenada? So it is something, and having said that, I mean, I don't want to continue the video necessarily, but it shocked me that there appeared not to be coordination between the authorities and the GTA, because the question of reopening must have been an issue in debate and consultations over a long, long period of time. So if that were the case, from the minute the announcement is put by the authorities, the GTA ought to have put on its website that new invitation that I'm talking about. So we have some issues there. But let me leave that. Let's hope that people act quickly in the national interest to correct that situation. So we say tourists, tour operators need information, travel agents, tourists need information. But let me tell you also, we, the Grenadian public, need information. Sometimes we put a big fancy label on it and we call it internal marketing, right? But it is very, very crucial. Why? Because it is the Grenadian people who must deliver the experience to the visitor. So we must be up to speed. So the situation has changed. Perhaps we could no longer be as intimate as we used to be with visitors. You understand me? Intimate, quote unquote. Yeah? So adjustments have to be made. But it begins with us understanding. The ordinary Grenadian must understand the times. And somebody must prepare him for that. So the little school child who would typically have run up to a tourist and so on, that child must now know it's not safe to do that. You see, I'm just dramatizing it. So it is very, very important if we want to address the question of the experience of those who come here, that apart from informing would-be tourists, that we also pay attention to providing information to our local population, who are the people responsible for delivering the visitor experience right? That cultural value that tourists get at our destination. That's it.
Speaking of the cultural value at destination, a lot of the Caribbean islands have collaborated in terms of the way they approach a number of the aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of them even have been in discussions in relation to the reopening of their respective borders, how to do it, when to do it, why we shouldn't do it now, and so on and so forth. How important is it that Caribbean countries coordinate their responses or their reopening of their borders, or should it be every man stands alone in their own timing to reopen?
Well, there's something, some things are desirable and some things fall somewhere else. I think it's going to be a balance of the two. There's going to be some extent to which there is a sharing of information, a reaching of consensus among some countries regarding the resumption of tourists into the region. There's going to be some sharing there. I think a lot of it is going to come down to decision making at the national level. You see, if you've had a case of people, for example, multi-stopping. So a fellow leaves Canada, he spends 5 days in St. Lucia, and then he comes over to Grenada to spend 5 days. So you see why those two countries in this context should in fact be talking to one another.
Right.
Maybe actual cases where some level of collaboration will take place. And it takes us back to this question of the classification and the basis for the criteria. Because if it is, the classifications were determined by criteria set up by CAFA, then it will be applicable to all the countries. If it was only set up by the Grenadian authorities, you see, there are going to be cracks there. And when you have cracks, things can slip through the cracks. You see? So it's desirable, yes, but there's a practical reality that we face where a number of countries are going to go it on their own, perhaps stumble here and there, and then when they stumble, they try to, somebody pulls them back up or something like that. But
okay, let's take a break and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. Speaking with former Director of Tourism here in Grenada, William Joseph, as Grenada prepares to reopen the Morris Bishop International Airport and the rest of its borders. This is To The Point on Classic GBN and Hot 98. We'll be right back.
Long ago, the strength of Grenadians was in their arms as they worked the lands to get food for the table. Nowadays, most Grenadians' plate is packed with lots of starch and meat, little or no vegetables, plenty fried foods, and they wash that down with something sweet while sitting in front of screen. Hard work and exercise seem to be out of style, and lifestyle diseases are becoming the fashion of the day and claiming many lives. Let's make a change to live longer. Let us grow and enjoy a variety of natural and safe, fresh vegetables and fruits every day. Use our local fresh seasoning and spices to make our traditional dishes healthier and avoid highly processed foods, snacks, and drinks. Drink more water every day to help your body function better. Get moving every day and trade some screen time to share and enjoy healthy family meals. Choose healthy foods and healthy lifestyle. Follow the healthy choices for healthy living guidelines for Grenadians.
The following are a list of food items to have on hand amidst COVID-19. Perishables like vegetables, fruits, provisions, and eggs. You are advised to stock perishable items to last up to 2 weeks. Non-perishable items including dry goods like cereals, flour, cornmeal, oats, rice, pasta, nuts, and nut butters like peanut butter, crackers, canned or frozen meats, ready to eat canned canned meats, powdered or canned milk, dried peas and beans, canned fruits in natural juices, 100% canned fruit juices, and canned vegetables. You can stock non-perishable food items to last up to 1 month. Store bottled or clean drinking water, 1 gallon or more per day per person. If you suffer from a medical condition, have prescribed medications on hand. A message from the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council as we battle COVID-19.
See it first on GBN. All the stories, from politics to industrial unrest. Tourism. Light it up. Light it up.
Nation to Grenada.
Entertainment. Sports and culture.
Great shot there of Anderson Peters from Grenada, the Commonwealth Games bronze medalist.
See more on GBN, your most credible source for information. Nightly at 7.
Welcome back to The Point. We are speaking with former Director of Tourism, William Joseph, as Grenada prepares to reopen its borders on July 15th and August 1st. Mr. Joseph, before we go to the phone lines, let me ask about regional travel. With the COVID-19 pandemic, each island facing their own troubles and struggles with the virus, how would it affect travel within the Caribbean?
All right, well, 2 broad points. One is that, if we try to identify the Caribbean traveler, and then we could talk about the airlines that service these islands. All right. So in terms of the Caribbean traveler, there are people you would expect who move around the Caribbean representing their institutions. So regional bodies, staff on regional bodies, consultants, and so on, right? So institutional travelers, that's one category. Then you would have business travelers, okay? People who move around for purposes of promoting their business, their products, and so on. You'd have that. Then you would have genuine Caribbean tourists, people who want a vacation, okay? And I think lastly, there are people who would move, and for example, in our case, people who travel to Barbados or to Trinidad and Tobago in search of visas and so on, and in some cases in search of health. So you have these different groups or categories of Caribbean travelers, okay? Of that list we identified, I think the softest area would be Caribbean tourists. People who would typically come for leisure purposes, whether it is via events or whether they simply want to come and rest in Grenada and enjoy Grenada and so on. I think that is what likely to be the softest of the 4 categories. So, and then on the other hand, we have the airlines that operate services into these our islands. There's LIA, there's Caribbean Airlines, SVG Air. There are some other charters that hop around the place and so on. Okay, so people could fill out that list. So there are going to be airlines involved. Now, to the extent that Caribbean economies have been affected by the COVID conditions, it means that the ability to pay for vacations in this case, that ability would be dampened. Okay, many people have been displaced in terms of their employment, and many others have lost sources of income or have suffered, income fragility. They may be on a rotation, so they earn less than they normally do, and so on. So the ability to pay for a vacation would be compromised. That is not going to be the case with the other three categories. All right, institutional, regional travelers are going to be able, because these bodies are paying for the flights, and business people likewise, and so too people who need to travel for health reasons. You don't really have a choice there. You even if you have to borrow, you're going to do it. And the people who travel because they're in search of a visa to the US or a visa to Canada, as the case might be. So that is the setup that we have. We just have to face the reality of the situation. The same points we make about international airlines, those points are also applicable to regional airlines. Load factor issues are going to be important. You recall, for example, there was some talk some months ago before COVID, where Liat was saying to certain other countries, pay to play, right? They were saying, help me, I need to cover my costs and so on, and I'm giving you a service. It's important to your economy and society, but you are not participating in covering my costs. And the fares I charge can't cover it. So we need official, let's say, we need government help, right? So those things are going to be on the table again. I could foresee that being on the table. Regional airlines seeking collaboration programs with governments and, to support them financially. The ability of governments to do so would be another question. but I could see that would be on the table.
Speaking of flights, the use of chartered flights seem to have increased in popularity over the past few months, as that was the only kind of flights that most countries were facilitating. Do you see this as the new direction tourism may be going worldwide?
Well, no, really.
Or it's blocking a hole for a time.
Yeah, but no, well, let me put it this way. The charter programs were purpose specific. In other words, you had nationals of country X who were stranded in country Y, and country X needed to get their people out because they weren't commercial flights. So they arranged a charter to fly in and take their people out, and however they cover the costs, that's for them. Okay? So we had some of it, other countries had some of it. The Americans flew some of their people out of Grenada. The Brits did the same, and so on and so on. So those are unique in their own right, and I don't think they establish a pattern at all that we could then transpose and say, for the future, there's likely to be that. But in the tourism industry, there's always been a charter component. There's always been that, right? And here individuals are taking risks. So somebody decides that, I could put up the capital to get an airline, to commit a plane to a flying program. I could market the thing myself. I could get assistance from the various tourism authorities. We market the flight and we bring people in. So I think some amount of that will continue to be the case.
All right, at this point, let's invite members of the public to participate. Those of you who may have questions, queries, comments, concerns for Mr. Joseph in relation to the reopening of Grenada's borders. Keep in mind he is a former Director of Tourism and not current. You can phone in. You can phone in with those comments or questions on 435-2041. You can also message us on the WhatsApp. It's also 435-2041. Please, only written messages on the WhatsApp. You can also post your comments, questions, queries, concerns on the GBN Television Facebook page, as well as the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel. Let me see if the phone is ringing before I go to the Facebook question. Actually, there's a WhatsApp question, Mr. Joseph, that is asking, do you think that nationals who are living in the diaspora should be tested and reported to their embassy and given a letter that will be handed to the authorities for a clean bill of health? Also, the local testing as done in all airports, so they will have to spend the 2-3 days of their vacation quarantined. So, do you think living in the diaspora, you should be tested and reported to your embassy?
Yes, because remember, we are reckoning with a disease, a virus in an environment. It's not nationality, it's not your nationality that's ruling here. It is the environment in which you live. So whether you're a Grenadian who you're living in New York or wherever, or a non-Grenadian, I think that the concern would be the same. People who live in the environment where the thing is present, regardless of nationality, that would be cause for concern to the extent that some testing would have to take place. Go ahead.
Another question, so I'll kind of restructure it a little bit.
Yeah, do that.
The requirements for re-entering the country involves quarantining for at least 4 days to 14 days. And that has been a deterrent for a few people, including returning nationals. Do you think some leeway should be given when it comes to being quarantined just in case you may have the virus or to make sure you don't have the virus? Or should passengers put up with it because it is required?
Well, what is the purpose of the quarantine? I think everybody needs to have some fresh thinking on what the situation is, right? It is what it is, and the science is the same as far as I could follow, all right? They are not arbitrarily imposing quarantine restrictions. They are saying quarantine because we need a period of time in which to determine the integrity of your health status. I'm putting it in this complex language. Let me simplify. They want a period of time in which they could figure out whether it is safe for you to move around Grenada, whether you're a returning national or otherwise. I think they made some, in terms of what I read, some accommodation in terms of where one would spend the quarantine period. So if one were a Grenadian national, for example, returning home, then after a preliminary period, maybe 2 or so days, then they can say to you, okay, go to your house, but observe so and so and so. In other words, a modified form of the quarantine arrangements. The issue is, at the base of it, why? Why? And I don't think that the authorities are flippantly imposing, humbug on people. I think the concern is that we do everything to try to minimize the entry of the virus into Grenada. Everything comes at a cost, Blossom, everything. In this little life that we live, everything comes with a cost, okay? And thankfully, a couple of days of quarantine is not a lifetime of quarantine.
I like that. A couple of days of quarantine is not a lifetime of quarantine. Let's go to the phone lines for our first caller. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Just turn the volume down on your TV.
Is that better?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Remember, we imported this disease before, and it can happen again. Secondly, the countries which we do business with, they still have the virus, and the virus is raging in some of these countries. We're not hearing much about Canada, but a white lady called me from Canada, a friend of mine, and told me that the virus is raging up there. And we are not getting much information about Canada, and we think Canada don't have the virus, but we're fooling ourselves here. So I think the question of open borders should be reviewed seriously, and we should put a hold on it. This thing about it happened before it could happen again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Mr. Joseph?
I think essentially we made a point before, so I agree with the caller. And that is why, because it can happen again, and it's precisely why the authorities have set out the regime they have to try and minimize the possibility or the likelihood of the thing coming in. Listen, it's not that we will never have a perfect situation with this COVID. It's not going to be perfect. We won't be able, no country, to shut it out completely at the level of the port. No country. So I think what we need to look at is whether our authorities are reacting to the information in a responsible and serious manner. And that's why, for example, I raised the concern earlier as to whether the criteria that for the classification of countries, low risk, medium, and high risk, and so on, whether those criteria were in fact set by a competent regional or international body. That would be important. And for the callers' sake, let me just say that Canada is I think they're on the medium risk, right?
Yes, they are.
So the authorities are aware that the disease is present everywhere, except Grenada, no.
Good point. Good point.
So and so on. So some things we're going to have to face. It's not a perfect world. We're going to have to face some things. The question is whether we take unreasonable risk or whether approach our business in a prudent and sensible manner with the primary objective of protecting the health of the Grenadian population.
And it's important to know as well that all the COVID-19 cases are being tracked by international bodies. So the authorities should, and I'm sure they are aware of the number of cases in each and every country that may be seeking to come to Grenada when the borders reopen. Let's go back to the phone lines. Good morning.
Good morning, Blossom, and to your guest, Mr. William or Joseph. I want to say we do enjoy a no COVID environment, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But somehow I cannot help but, feel as though we are being a little selfish. I've known of cases of people that are living here, have their business, have their home, their children, went out to shop, even as close as Trinidad, and only be told on the airport, on the way to the airport at the Grenada borders, or the airport has been closed and they can't come home. And these people have children in school that they have to supervise. And for all of this time, they had to be out there. I've heard of this case where this gentleman is saying, he's in Jamaica, his money run out, he has health challenges. He wants to come home. I really believe we need to put ourselves in these people's situations and think of them. We know what we have to do: wear a mask, protect ourselves, wash our hands. Let us practice safe hygiene. Because no matter where you are, you just might encounter somebody that might have had the virus. What are we going to do? Forever close our borders? Our economy, it's in a bad state. You hear people saying, yes, you open up, you're extending the curfew, but not a lot of activities happening. We need the money, we really do, and we really need to take other people's considerations, into heart and think about all of the children that are hurting because their parents can't come home. Or those are in university that want to come home, they finish and they can't.
Thank you, caller. You too. Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, well, I didn't get all of it because, but I got something about the lady kept stressing on this question of people wanting to come home. And that is in a very emotional way, and that's a human thing. We understand. All of us would identify with that. I have a friend, my best friend and brother in life, who's been went to look after his health in another country. And he's been there now for several months. He wishes to come home. It's painful for him. It's painful for me. He's my brother and friend. So, I understand that. I think everybody understands that. Now, how do we make it happen? The coming home happen? Coming home, people have to get on planes to come home. The planes, the airlines are going to operate if there is business to be had, a sufficient level of business. So the commercial airlines have said that. The charter arrangements are different in the sense that, for example, a group of people with money in Grenada can say, let us put up our money. So I'm not just putting it on the government, I'm saying a group of people could put up some money and say, you know, there are 30 Grenadians in the country. Why? Let us charter a plane and bring them home. You see, because there are people who individually, because of their means and so on, may not be able to charter a plane themselves. So the question is, can corporate Grenada or can the government of Grenada assist them by way of paying for such a service? So when we say that they want to come home, that is there's no doubt about that. The question is, how do we get them home? And then some different issues arise. See, some different issues arise. So they fall in the category of the point I was making about paying a price for things. At this point, it's not just mere inconvenience. There are other costs that people are paying because they happen to be caught in another place. You see, and it's hard. But we're waiting on the banks of the River Jordan. So perhaps the Lord will make a way for us to cross over to the other side.
Amen. As we wind on the program, Mr. Joseph, let me ask this. A lot of people are saying COVID-19 has taught us that we were putting all, if not most of our eggs in the tourism basket. But with the shutdown of our borders, it has taught us that agriculture should be our focus. Do you think we should, going forward, there should now be sort of a shift in focus from emphasis on tourism to put an emphasis on agriculture? Or do you think we should still make sure that we have our tourism industry locked down?
Yeah, I've never been one to encourage this debate between the sectors and some kind of comparative way or whatever. It does not make sense, really. I understand it. I've heard it for years, but it doesn't make sense. Let's just look at the international airport that all of us as Grenadians are proud about. Agriculture can finance the operation of that airport. If we don't have tourism, that airport becomes a white elephant. So that's just, I'm dramatizing the response to the thing. There is so much of the agricultural sector that's dependent on tourism, the tourism industry, to buy the products, fruits and vegetables and fish in particular. A lot of folks don't pay attention to that, right? If you had to feed people, 100,000 of us here, but we bring in 300,000 tourists, 3 times as many people to be fed in Grenada. You see, so if the market for a fruit farmer is enlarged automatically on the basis of tourism, stayover arrivals and tourism into Grenada. So tourism can pull agriculture. You see, yeah. No, and then so that's one dimension of it. The other dimension is people. Well, there are 2 other factors. One is export agriculture, and one is subsistence agriculture. In other words, the feed yourself argument. Right? No, there is a place for that. A lot of effort is going to have to go into that, not just on the production side, but on the consumption side. Because we are faced with certain cultural issues there, especially with younger generations. A while ago, you heard me, I talked about smelling the cocoa tea. But you name any number of Grenadians under 30 right now who ain't want no cocoa tea, right? So there are cultural issues surrounding the consumption of food, right? If we have no choice, then they have to eat the green fig and they have to eat it. But if they have a choice, they ain't eating the green fig. They're eating something else coming from somewhere else. So you know, we have to be sensible about how we approach these things. right? I said the two sectors are important to the national economy. The two sectors support people, human lives in this country. A lot of the population are tourism dependent. A lot are agriculture dependent. We need to put plus signs between these things, not minus signs or division signs. Plus signs and multiplication signs, so we get something bigger and better on the other side of the equation. That's how I view it.
I want to thank you very much, Mr. Joseph, for being our guest this morning. Any final words? 30 seconds. Final words?
I hope and pray that that we move the needle on this question of how we address the question of leading the country in this period, because it's a new future that we're facing, and a lot of the old methods and practices and the huff and puff wouldn't cut it. We need to put stronger and better efforts behind what we're doing, and we need to make the best use of the human resources that we have in Grenada to help us to take advantage of that new future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Continue to stay safe and COVID-free.
Will do. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Want to thank former Director of Tourism in Grenada, Mr. William Joseph, for being our guest this morning. We appreciate his input and his thoughts as we prepare to reopen Grenada's borders July 15th and August 1st. And thank you, our viewers and listeners, for tuning into the program. Appreciate your time as always. That's the end of my time today. Joseph is up next with Mid-Morning Buzz. I am on my way home to take in some cricket. Right now, the Windies have England at 157 for 7. Jason Holder picking up 4 wickets for 31 runs. Shannon Gabriel 3 for 62. Yes, we inside. We in ting. All right, have yourselves a productive Thursday. Joseph is up next. Bye-bye, everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow, God willing.